In the year 1949, Simone de Beauvoir famously said, "One is not born, but rather becomes woman." By this she means that we are not born with our gender, but that we learn to develop it over a period of time, according to society.
I just no understand. Next thing you know, women want to be hunter and gatherer.
And then, on September 23, 1995, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints put out the family a proclamation to the world, saying that gender is something we are born with, and that the two genders are essential to raising children. The proclamation declares,
"All human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God. Each is a beloved spirit son or daughter of heavenly parents, and as such, each has a divine nature and destiny. Gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. In the premortal realm, spirit sons and daughters knew and worshiped God as their eternal Father, and accepted His plan by which His children could obtain a physical body and gain earthly experience to progress toward perfection and ultimately realize his or her divine destiny as an heir of eternal life."
25 years later, the proclamation has never been more controversial. Today, some people view the document as hateful and hurtful towards LGBTQ+ people. Some have taken it upon themselves to make their own version of the proclamation. Others have attempted to explain the Church's position on sexual orientation. I have provided some links in the description down below that you can look at, but in this video I wish to look at the second concept, which deals with gender identification. Specifically, is gender a social construct, or are we born with it? Margaret Mead was an anthropologist who observed many cultures and tribes in which the men and women seemed to play very similar roles. In some tribes, the men and women were nurturing, while another tribe featured both men and women who were very aggressive. Other tribes claimed to have a third or fourth gender. Some claim women should have the opportunity to be construction workers, soldiers, CEOs, and other roles previously associated with men. Men should also have the opportunity to be stay-at-home dads, elementary school teachers, nurses, and other roles previously identified as female. Both genders must have the opportunity to choose the role they want to pursue in their lives. This I am all for. However, things become complicated when we consider the gender equality paradox. In a documentary, a man was mesmerized by the paradox in Nordic countries, and so sought out professionals in various fields. In Sweden, some families have attempted to raise boys as girls and girls as boys, but as soon as the children are given the agency to choose for themselves, they almost universally revert back to their birth gender. It turns out that the more liberal a country is for gender equality, then the bigger there is of a divide between the genders' professional fields. If gender is a social construct, then newborns must be a blank slate with no signs of gender identity of any kind. But in the documentary, we meet a Professor Trond Diseth, who does experiments with 9-month-old children to determine gender identity, something he uses to determine the gender of intersex children. He puts various gender-specific toys around the child, and whatever toys the child chooses, then that's the gender that child is. He found that it is extremely consistent of girls choosing feminine toys and boys choosing masculine toys. Now, of course, as soon as a child becomes older, we should not be surprised if children experiment with the opposite gendered toys. I think a better determining factor is how the child plays with the toys. Specifically, where does the interest of the child lie in regards to the toy? An even more accurate experiment is done by the lesser-known Baron Cohen, Simon Baron Cohen of Trinity College. He takes biological gender idea to an earlier state to just born children. He found that when he held up something mechanical, The boys would look at the mechanism longer than the face, but the girls would look at the face longer. This suggests that in general, girls are more social than boys, and boys are more interested in building than girls. These studies show that the more testosterone a person has, the more likely that person will be interested in stereotypical male things, likewise estrogen for feminine things. Those with higher testosterone can have a difficulty with things like empathy, but have a much stronger interest in systems. According to Simon Baron-Cohen, one can predict an infant's interests by merely looking at their hormone levels. Professor Anne Campbell, a psychologist at Durham University, teaches that gender roles came about as the best course of survival passed down through the gene pool.
The key to all this is how many descendants you leave behind you, and any traits that increase the number of descendants you leave behind you will tend to stay in the gene pool. And so that's what's selecting in particular traits, both in males and in females.
Så hvorfor har evolusjonen gjort kvinner og menn forskjellige?
If women are generally the ones that give birth, that lactate, that raise children, it would be very surprising if there wasn't some kind of psychological orchestration that helped women achieve those tasks and made those kinds of tasks particularly pleasurable to women. So things like empathy in women, things like avoiding dangerous confrontations where you may be hurt or injured, things like avoiding social exclusion, being pushed out of the group, all of those are good things. All of those mean that you are more likely to survive and to reproduce and to leave children who themselves also reproduce.
Så forskjellen mellom gutter og jenter er egentlig bare kjønnsorganet. Altså, alt som ikke har med det reproduktive systemet å gjøre, for å si det sånn da. Det er ikke bare den der nede. Hva da? Alt utenom det? Nei, altså bryster og hår og høyde og muskelmasse og en del andre ting, ikke sant? Men alt utenom det da, er ingen forskjell. Følelser, emosjonalitet, ja, følelser, interesser, intelligens, altså kapasitet. Er likt. Ja, er i utgangspunktet likt, ja.
Amazing.
Amazing?
Absolutely amazing. I'm astonished that someone could say that. I guess the question I would pose is, where do bodily differences come from? Where do the differences between men and women's reproductive systems come from? Evolution, I'm sure, would be the answer that most social scientists would give. And what orchestrates those bodily differences? What is responsible for the production of hormones and peptides that keep everything going? The human brain, mostly, yes, through feedback systems. It seems to me quite extraordinary that you could imagine that evolution has operated on the reproductive systems and has had absolutely no effect at all on our brain, the single most expensive organ that we have in the body.
I think that overall, societies do have an impact on gender identity, but gender identity itself is not purely a product of society. The woman gender came about as the best way for the female to operate, and the man gender came about as the best way for the male to operate in society. It is a match of physical and psychological effects of hormones on mind and body. Males typically have thicker bones and skin, more muscle mass, and larger lungs compared to females, and so some competitive sports are separated by gender to provide a more equal playing field that takes into account the physical characteristics typical of males and females. According to some studies, it doesn't matter how much estrogen a male takes or testosterone a female takes, they may still have a physical advantage or disadvantage based on early developmental factors specific to genetic gender. Females are better attuned to their senses. They see more colors, smell stronger odors, and can hear better even while sleeping, so they can hear a crying baby in the middle of the night. They also have much higher oxytocin levels, which are critical for creating that mother-child bond. For some, the genders they recognize are feminine female, masculine female, feminine male, and masculine male. However, just because a male is more feminine than average, or a female is more masculine than average, there is still male and female. If you're a female who doesn't feel you fit perfectly into the mainstream definition of femininity, you are still female. We need to understand that while there are only two genders, there are multiple ways to perform gender. So perform your gender in the way that you know best in your own personal way. We then further read that the Proclamation puts forth rules on how each gender can be best suited to the family.
By divine design, fathers are to preside over their families in love and righteousness, and are responsible to provide the necessities of life and protection for their families. Mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. In these sacred responsibilities, fathers and mothers are obligated to help one another as equal partners. Disability, death, or other circumstances may necessitate individual adaptation.
No gender is inferior or superior over the other. The two are the perfect complements to each other with their own unique strengths. They are more alike than different, but differences they have nonetheless. The duality of the sexes is cause for celebration rather than frustration.
In his grand design, when God first created man, he created a duality of the sexes. The ennobling expression of that duality is found in marriage. One individual is complementary to the other. As Paul stated, neither is the man without the woman, neither the woman without the man in the Lord. There is no other arrangement that meets the divine purposes of the Almighty. Man and woman are his creations. Their duality is his design. Their complementary relationships and functions are fundamental to his purposes. One is incomplete without the other.
But what do you guys think? Is gender a social construct that we are free to play around with? Or do you think that there is also something biological that we are born with? And is it possible that gender is so a part of us as to predate birth and go beyond death? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Press that subscribe button and keep it righteous, guys.